Maggie was already the sleeper pick back in Season 13, but after some massive buffs in Season 14, she just become a must pick. So why is no one playing Mad Maggie, and why should you? But first, big thanks to Outplayed for sponsoring this video. Don't you wish you could capture every kill, win, or even death? Outplayed automatically records in the background and makes clips of, well, what you tell it to. Whatever you choose will show up on the timeline for your convenience, allowing you to look back and decide what you want to do with the highlights that you've decided on, including exporting small clips or even full games to YouTube. Whether you want to trim a clip and send it to the group chat or review your own dev to see what you could do better, Outplayed's got you covered. Outplayed supports over 300 games and the list just keeps getting bigger. Check out the link in the description and download Outplayed for free today. Starting with Maggie's tactical, Riot Drill's projectile speed was doubled, dramatically increasing the range of which it's useful. And her ultimate now travels twice as far. Its duration has been increased from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. The little blue magnets that it drops are more spread out to accommodate for the longer range, and there also was a lot of bug fixes as the Wrecking Ball wasn't blinding or slowing enemies properly. And finally, most importantly, it now deals damage to enemy placeable objects, and it completely breaks Gibraltar's dome. What they also didn't disclose was that the damage the Wrecking Ball does seems to be infinite. When you, for example, hit a Horizon's ultimate or Seer's ultimate, it deals 300 damage and instantly destroys them. That is a lot different than what was listed in the patch notes. Not only that, but with the rise of a more passive playstyle, Maggie also received a significant indirect buff, as there will be more space to be the contrarian and play aggressively. If you couple that together with the massive EVA 8 buff, Mad Maggie becomes unstoppable if you combine it with her passive. Despite all of this, Maggie's pick rate still only sits at 2.8%. And if you think that's sad, make sure to hit the like button. And why is that? It might be because people just haven't thought of running her, especially with the rise of the more passive sniper camping meta that came forth with the addition of Vantage, but most importantly, it might be because of all the marksman rifles being buffed or becoming ground loot, along with sniper ammo becoming more accessible, as there now is another sniper ammo weapon in the loot pool with the wingman. Maggie or her common duo Seer are not any weaker this season than any previous ones. On the contrary, they're a lot stronger, both on paper and in execution. Perhaps people don't know how she's supposed to work and just decide to fall back on the safe, passive poking meta, so let me elaborate on how to actually play Maggie. The set compositions continues to be Maggie, Seer, and Valkyrie. You could swap Valkyrie out if you would like to, but despite her nerf, the rotations are still very valuable and will help you, especially if you're playing on the edge and looking for kills, because the biggest risk of playing on edge is that you simply get held out of zone. But Valkyrie mitigates this and allows you to fly above the team that might be gatekeeping you. As far as the macro gameplay and the strategy goes, your overall game plan can boil down to one thing. You're playing on the edge and you're looking for kills. You land on the edge of the map, preferably on large points of interest that has a lot of loot, but take a decent amount of time to loot. You do have to be wary of the new ring timers, but it won't be a problem if you're paying attention to the ring. Continue looting for as long as possible, as you want to ensure that you have the loot advantage over any enemy teams that may have rotated earlier. Every point of interest has a set amount of rotations, and several points where teams may end up clashing. Now, this comes down to map awareness and game sense, and I won't be able to tell you every single one, but you want to look for these areas to either find a fight that you can force or follow the gunshots to find a third party that you can take. Just make sure that you enter it at the right time. Keep the fight clean and try not to get knocked to avoid getting third partied yourself. Maggie's ultimate further assists with the strategy, allowing you to do some speedy rotations even on the edge, and it recharges incredibly fast, meaning you can use it for a rotation but then still have it readily available for a team fight. Its cooldown is only 1.5 minutes long, and it starts recharging the second that the Wrecking Ball leaves your hands. As I said, getting kitted early in the game is vital. You will start with a leg up on any opponents that you run into, and by the end of the first fight, you should have all of the loot from 2 teams plus leveled up armors. This will let you look for more fights and always have this loot advantage, eventually being able to snowball your team into a fully looted powerhouse that can win any fair fights that you find yourself in. Now, the keyword is fair fights, or even better, advantageous fights. Don't take my words as a means to recklessly run straight into a team and wonder why the plan didn't work as you ran straight into the enemy's crosshair. If you see an enemy team, make sure that you have a good idea of the surrounding area. Are there any other teams around? Is the fight isolated? Do you have any entries to go on or any loot advantage, such as I mentioned, higher armor? You can always force a fight, but forcing doesn't have to mean throwing yourself at them. When you find a team that you can take a good fight with, that's when your team composition comes into play. To explain the tactics, I won't factor in the third legend, as it could be Valkyrie, but you may have slotted her out for someone else, say Gibraltar. faster. Let me reiterate, the best team fights to take are against teams that are far away from other teams, meaning that it is an isolated fight. Extra points if they're fully set up, as the game has an attacker's advantage and you can slowly whittle them down without there being too much they can do to fight back, especially when you're running a composition like this. Extra points for teams that have bad guns, armors, or composition, or maybe even are a man down. Start by positioning yourselves at different angles and look for poke damage. You want to crack 1 or even 2 or even 3 of the enemy team, but ideally you want a knock. This can be done from any range, though I would recommend doing this at a medium or so range so you don't risk getting counter pushed by the enemy team as you are setting up. Once you got in your cracks or even knocks, that means it's go time. Maggie can place a right drill where the enemies normally would peek out of to deny them vision of that area for a few seconds, and at the same time throw a wrecking ball to close the gap between the two teams immediately. She can also use the right drill to destroy placeable objects or doors, or if you place your drill well enough, deny a revive if you do get a knock. If possible, you'll want to throw the wrecking ball so it breaks any door that the enemies may be hiding behind, or make sure that it hits one of them on the way through. Depending on the situation, Seer may want to throw his tactical out as well to deny the other team from healing up while you are moving up, as well as giving the rest of your team the full information about what the other team is doing for the duration of the fight. The constant wall hacks from Seer and Maggie's passive will allow you to know exactly how to maneuver the fight to your advantage, and Maggie's shotgun movement speed bonus in her passive gives you a leg up on shotgun and peak fights. When you get to this point, it's gonna be hard for me to explain how exactly you should play a fight. Basic sense applies. Try not to over peak, and again, use the shotgun advantage when you can. Try to use the riot drill off cooldown and force your enemies out of cover. You can also use the riot drill and then play right next to it. The flame will conceal you from your enemies, but if you damage them, they will be highlighted by your passive, giving you a massive vision advantage, which wins you almost every duel. Seer can also drop his exhibit at any point in the fight, either when you are engaging or when you have been fighting for a while, to reveal if any third parties will roll in during the fight. Once you've won the fight and cleaned up, brace for a third party while resetting. Once you know that it is all safe, you can loot up and start looking towards the rest of the game. You now own your own loot plus the loot from another team, and your armors are being upgraded as well. This means that any other isolated fight that you take will be even easier. You can repeat this until the circle gets so small that you can't take any fights without getting bent over by the rest of the lobby. And now you're at that point where your game plan has to change from aggressively taking fights to instead covering as much ground as possible and denying your enemies from taking it. In other words, controlling the space. The faster teams usually take all of the good positions, and some teams may have horrible loot because they rotated that much earlier, which means that you can ego challenge anyone that you want. Keep this in mind and look for unclaimed space, potentially in the open. And that might actually mean space in the open. You want to start by cleaning the ring behind you and rotate up, gradually clearing as much space as you can to ensure that you are alone in the area and that you have full control of it. If you run into any rats or rogue teams, you can try to dispose of them quickly. If they are too much trouble, just leave them and continue claiming space that nobody has taken. An aggressive team taking space can end up with half of, if not more than that, of the final ring, which significantly helps if the ring pulls in your favor. After you've claimed all of the space that you need, you just need to flow with the rest of the lobby. Apply pressure to the camping teams and don't let them run out if the ring ends in the space that you control. If you're the one forced to take a fight against a camping team to get to the final ring, try to apply the same teamfight tactics and roll over them when you can. Clean fighting is vital here. After that, you still need to continue making the moves that give you the most space, or if possible, even make a contest for a god spot in the final ring. Your composition allows to play explosively and blow up a camping team quickly, which is exacerbated by the fact that you should have amazing loot by now, and in theory, that should be enough for you to win the game, or at the very least secure a very high placement with loads of team kills. And of course, you're gonna have a blast while doing it. And that's just one way of playing around an aggressive Maggie composition. I could cover more of these, so if you're interested, let me know in the comments, and make sure to subscribe if you liked it. Check out the video on the screen if you want to hear about some more patch notes that weren't covered in Season 14. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.